The house smelled like cinnamon and pine. Evelyn Carter moved through her kitchen with calm hands and a heart that would not slow down. She checked the roast, lifted the lid on the spiced cider, and wiped a spot from the counter that only she could see. It was New Year's Eve, and her home was bright with soft lights, gold ribbons, and the old clock she and her late husband had bought on a winter sale long ago. Every year she hosted this party. Every year, friends said her house felt warm. Tonight, her chest felt tight. Brandon had promised to come early. He used to help with chairs and fairy lights. He used to sneak tastes from the frosting bowl and tell her she was the best cook in the city. Those days felt far away. Lately his voice had a new edge, like he was busy even when he stood still. When he finally walked in, he didn't kiss her cheek. He looked around the room like a realtor measuring space. Sabrina followed, perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect perfume that stayed in the air after she moved on. "Lovely, Evelyn," she said, and gave the kind of hug that never touched the ribs. "Chloe," Evelyn said, and her face softened at once. The little girl ran into her arms with a paper crown already crooked on her head. "Grandma, we brought sparklers," Chloe said. Evelyn pressed her forehead to Chloe's and smiled for real. "We'll light them at midnight," she said. She didn't add, "if the night stays kind." Guests began arriving, neighbors from the end of the lane, her book club friend with a tray of brownies, an old colleague who always told the same joke about resolutions. Laughter echoed through the rooms. The tree glittered. Music hummed at a polite volume. When Sabrina's father, Charles Wells, stepped in, the air tilted. He had the presence of a man used to walking straight into boardrooms and winning. His handshake was firm and brief. "Evening, Evelyn," he said, eyes scanning the crown molding, the framed wedding photo, the mantel clock. He nodded once, as if he had taken notes. Evelyn moved among the guests, topping up cider, collecting coats, smiling on cue. She warned herself not to read into looks, not to hear what no one had said. Yet, when she passed the doorway to her small office, she paused. The door was closed but not latched. On the edge of the oak desk, the corner of a file peeped out. It was the file that should have been inside the locked drawer. She pushed the door open with her fingertips, stepped in, and slid the file back into the drawer. The drawer stuck for a moment, then clicked shut. She breathed out slowly, like someone blowing on a candle that she didn't want to go out. In the living room, Brandon had gathered two of his old friends. He laughed, but his eyes kept touching the ceiling, the stairs, the hall that led toward the bedrooms. Every time Chloe tugged his sleeve, he patted her head without looking down. When Evelyn offered him a plate, he said, "Later," the way people say it when they mean no. Sabrina floated between groups, all compliments and light jokes, but when she thought no one watched, she and Charles stood shoulder to shoulder, speaking low. Their faces were smooth. Their eyes were not. "Mom, where are the champagne flutes?" Brandon asked finally, appearing at her elbow like a waiter late for his shift. "Top cabinet," she said. "Same as every year." He nodded and turned away. The answer was not new, but he looked displeased anyway, as if secrets should have been hidden in new places for his convenience. Evelyn refilled bowls, straightened napkins, adjusted a strand of lights that flickered. She told herself the same thing she had told herself for weeks. Stay patient, stay kind, stay clear. She had made choices in quiet rooms with clear heads. She had signed papers with a lawyer who explained everything twice. She had told herself she was not acting out of spite, but out of love for the only person in the world who still made her feel purely happy, Chloe, with her crooked crown and serious eyes. If anyone tried to shake her life, there would be steady things underneath. By 11:30, the house felt full and soft. A neighbor played a silly song on the piano. Chloe tried on every hat from the party basket and declared each one the best. Sabrina checked her phone again and again. Charles stood near the fireplace with his hands behind his back, a general surveying a map. Evelyn pulled the roast, carved a few more slices, and took a plate to her book club friend, who squeezed her hand and said, "You always make it lovely." The words landed like a blanket, light but real. A few minutes before midnight, Brandon took the long wooden spoon from the punch bowl and tapped it against a glass. The sound rang bright and sharp. Conversations faded. Music stopped. People turned. Evelyn felt the clock inside her body start to count in single beats. Brandon smiled his old smile, the one that used to come with scraped knees and school awards. It didn't reach his eyes. "Friends," he said, voice strong. "Thank you for coming. It means a lot to celebrate the new year with people who matter. I want to say something important tonight. It's about family and moving forward. Evelyn stood still with a folded napkin in her hands. Sabrina stepped closer to Brandon, touching his arm, chin high. Charles shifted his weight, satisfied. Chloe, who had been making her paper crown stand up straight, leaned against the sofa arm and watched her father like children do, open and unguarded. Brandon continued, "This house has been our center for a long time. But life changes. We're starting a new chapter. It's time for my mom to take a step back. Starting tonight, she won't be living here anymore." The words fell into the room like ice. Someone gasped. Someone coughed. The old colleague closed his mouth around the joke he had been about to tell. Sabrina's fingers tightened on Brandon's sleeve. Charles allowed himself a small clap, 2 smart taps that sounded like a stamp on paper. Evelyn felt the napkin tear softly in her hands. She did not look down. She did not cry. The first feeling was not anger, and not even shock. It was a long, low sadness that started in her chest and moved out to her shoulders, like rain filling a lake. She counted a steady breath. She thought of the office door. She thought of the drawer that had clicked shut. She thought of a different door at a lawyer's office, and a pen that had moved carefully across a line. She looked at Chloe, whose mouth had opened in a small O. The first days of January were always quiet. The tree lights came down, the wreaths were packed away, and the cold outside felt sharper without the glow of holidays to soften it. But inside Evelyn Carter's chest, nothing felt calm. The memory of Brandon's words still rang in her ears. Starting tonight, she won't be living here anymore. She folded the last strand of garland into a box and placed it in the closet, her fingers shaking only after the door was closed. Guests had left that night pretending nothing had happened, but their faces were burned into her mind. Pity in some eyes, shame in others, a cruel pride in Charles's smirk. And Chloe's small voice asking, "Daddy, where will Grandma go?" That voice haunted her most of all. Brandon hadn't apologized. The next morning, he avoided her gaze, acting as if the announcement had been natural, a decision already accepted. Sabrina was worse. She hummed in the kitchen, rearranged furniture without asking, and spoke of the house as if Evelyn were a guest overstaying her welcome. But Evelyn was not blind. Long before the New Year's party, she had noticed the signs. It began weeks earlier when she walked past her office and found the door ajar. A drawer that was always locked stood open. The folder with her property deed sat slightly crooked, as if someone had hurriedly pushed it back. She had felt her throat tighten but said nothing. Later, she overheard whispers in the kitchen, Sabrina telling Brandon, "Once the house is in our name, things will finally change." Brandon didn't argue. He just sighed as though surrendering to her will. The moment Evelyn realized she could not trust her own son, something inside her hardened. That same afternoon, she had walked through the snow into town and entered her lawyer's office. The man, a steady old friend named Henry, listened quietly as she explained her fears. He didn't laugh, didn't dismiss her. He nodded. "You've given your whole life to this family," he said. "If you want to protect what's yours, we'll put it in writing." So they drew up papers. A living trust. Evelyn remained the sole resident of the house for her lifetime. And after her, the house would belong not to Brandon, not to Sabrina, but to Chloe. Evelyn had signed her name slowly, each stroke of the pen like building a wall around her granddaughter's future. When she walked out, the snow had felt less cold. Back in the present, Sabrina's footsteps interrupted Evelyn's thoughts. She entered the living room carrying a new rug still wrapped in plastic. "Charles says this color will make the place look more modern," she said, as if Evelyn were a tenant in her own home. Evelyn only nodded. She saved her words now, because silence gave her strength. That night, after Brandon and Sabrina left for dinner with Charles, Evelyn tucked Chloe into bed. The little girl yawned and whispered, "Grandma, you're not leaving, right?" Evelyn smoothed her hair and kissed her forehead. "No, my love," she said softly. "This will always be our place." She turned off the lamp and sat by the bed until Chloe's breathing evened into sleep. Alone in her room, Evelyn opened the small metal box on her nightstand. Inside lay the stamped trust papers, folded neatly safe. She traced the edge of the document with her finger, remembering Henry's calm voice. "When the time comes, show them this. No one can take your home from you." She wondered what the time would look like. A private conversation? A shouting match? She had not imagined humiliation in front of a crowd. But perhaps fate had chosen that setting. Everyone had witnessed Brandon's betrayal. Everyone had heard Sabrina's silence and Charles's clap. And when the truth came out, those same witnesses would see the collapse of their scheme. The next few days made everything clearer. Brandon came home late, carrying folders, signing forms without speaking. Once, Evelyn spotted him slipping an envelope into his jacket, legal papers with her address on the front. He caught her glance and quickly turned away. Sabrina grew bolder, pointing out which furniture she planned to replace, which wall she wanted painted, even which room might be better for Chloe once Mom's gone. Evelyn listened with a face like stone. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the house was already untouchable. Their signatures, their plans, their arrogance meant nothing. Evelyn almost pitied them, but the sting of Brandon's public words cut too deep for pity. One evening, as snow tapped against the windows, Evelyn sat by the fire with Chloe. The child drew pictures with crayons, bright houses, and smiling suns. "That's our home," Chloe said proudly, pointing at a drawing where Evelyn and Chloe stood side by side. Brandon and Sabrina were missing. Evelyn's throat ached. She wanted to ask why Chloe hadn't drawn her parents, but she already knew. Children see more than adults admit. She folded the drawing carefully and slipped it between the trust papers in her metal box. One was law, the other was love. Together, they were unshakable. The night before the next weekend, Evelyn heard Sabrina's voice carrying down the hall. She was speaking sharply to Brandon in the kitchen. "It's embarrassing. She's still here like nothing happened. We need to push harder, Brandon. My father says we can't look weak. We'll make another announcement. Bigger this time. Everyone will understand it's final." Evelyn stood in the shadows, her hands curling into fists, her jaw tight. So they planned another humiliation. Another stage. They thought her silence meant defeat. They thought her calm meant surrender. But Evelyn knew better. The next time Brandon raised his glass, the firework would not be his. It would be hers. Snow still clung to the edges of the sidewalks by the time Saturday came. The week after New Year's felt long and cold, but the house stayed warm because Evelyn kept it that way. She cooked small meals, kept the kettle going, and tried to make each room gentle for Chloe. She said little to Brandon and Sabrina. Silence was not surrender, it was her way to listen. And what she heard in that silence was enough. Sabrina called it a New Beginnings dinner. She sent a group message to a few of Brandon's friends and to Charles's business circle. She didn't ask Evelyn if she could host it. She simply wrote, "At our place at 7. We'll share the plan." The words sat in Evelyn's stomach like stones. Our place. It was not carelessness, it was intent. Evelyn phoned Henry that morning. Her voice was calm. "You told me to keep copies," she said. "I have them." "Good," Henry replied. "If anyone presses you tonight, you show them. And Evelyn, do not argue. Just present the facts. Facts are quiet and heavy. Let them do the work." She thanked him, then set the receiver down and stood for a long moment by the window, watching a pair of birds hop across the frozen grass. "Quiet and heavy," she repeated in her mind. She opened the metal box and split the papers into 2 folders, one for her, one for a safe hand later if needed. By evening the dining room was dressed again, this time in Sabrina's taste. A gray runner, black plates, tall empty vases meant to look modern. The food was ordered in, not cooked. Boxes lined the counter, neat labels facing forward. When guests began to arrive, Sabrina greeted each one with a bright voice and a quick look at the room, as if checking that it matched the picture in her head. Charles arrived with a man in a trim coat who carried a small briefcase. "A notary," Charles said to Brandon, not bothering to lower his voice. "In case we need signatures tonight." He glanced at Evelyn and smiled in a way that did not reach his eyes. Chloe ran in from the hall, her socks sliding on the wood floor. "Grandma, I made a fort in the den," she announced. "It has pillows and a keep-out sign, but you can come in." Evelyn laughed and squeezed her hand. "I will after dinner," she said. "Save me the best corner." She crouched to Chloe's height. "If grown-ups start talking loudly, I want you to take your book into your fort." "Okay." Chloe nodded with solemn importance. "I know," she whispered. "Fort rules." The table filled. Brandon poured wine, and Sabrina arranged people like pieces on a board. Charles stood at the head as if the honor were his, not asking, simply taking. Through it all, Evelyn kept her seat and her breath steady. She placed her folder on the chair beside her, the edge peeking out just enough for her fingertips to find. Dinner was not really dinner. It was a stage. After a few jokes and clinks of glass, Sabrina set her napkin down and looked at Brandon. He tapped a spoon against his glass. The room hushed as easily as it had on New Year's Eve. This time, he spoke without the shy smile. He He sounded like a man who thought the ground already belonged to him. "Thank you for coming," he said. "We're excited to share what's next for our family. As you heard on New Year's, we're moving forward with a change. We want to align the house with our plans for the future. There's paperwork," he added, nodding toward the man with the briefcase. "Simple stuff." Across the table, Evelyn's book club friend Nora, quiet, kind, lifted her eyebrows at Evelyn and tilted her chin as if asking, "Are you okay?" Evelyn gave the smallest nod. 2 seats down, the neighbor from the end of the lane kept his eyes on his plate, uncomfortable. Charles noticed the ripple and stepped in smoothly. "This is normal," he said to the group. "Families update titles all the time. Evelyn has enjoyed this home for many years. Brandon and Sabrina are ready to take responsibility. We'll make sure Evelyn is comfortable." The pause before comfortable was a cut. Evelyn let the words pass through her like wind. She knew their idea of comfort was a small rental far from Chloe's school and far from the garden where Chloe learned to plant herbs last spring. She reached for her water and did not miss the way Sabrina's gaze slid to the hallway that led to the office, then back to her phone. The notary opened his briefcase. He withdrew a neat stack of forms with tabs in bright colors. Brandon took a paper from the top and tapped it with his finger. "First," he said, "we'll handle mailing addresses and utilities. Then we'll talk about the deed transfer. It's straightforward." "Straightforward," Evelyn said softly, the first word she had offered to the table all night. She did not raise her voice. She did not tremble. She set down her glass and folded her hands. "I like straightforward." Brandon's jaw tightened. "Mom, we don't need to make this difficult." "Brandon," she replied, "difficulty isn't made. It's chosen." She turned to Chloe. "Sweetheart, would you get your book for me and start your fort?" Chloe looked at her father, then at her grandmother, and chose the steady face. She slipped off her chair and padded to the den, the keep-out sign flapping as she crawled under the blanket roof. Sabrina leaned forward. "Evelyn, we've spoken about this." "No," Evelyn said. "You've spoken at me. And you announced me out of my own home in front of my friends." She lifted one of the forms, read a line, and set it back as if it were too light to hold meaning. "You keep using the word transfer," she said to Charles, "as if there were something to move." "It's routine," Charles replied, smiling. "We're just aligning ownership with reality." Evelyn met his smile with a steady look. Reality can be stubborn. Unease flickered across Brandon's face. He looked to Sabrina. Sabrina looked to Charles. The notary, professional and detached, kept his pen uncapped but lowered. The room had grown quiet again, but it was a different quiet now, curious, waiting like air before a storm. Brandon pushed his chair back, the legs scraping the floor. "Mom," he said, choosing a voice that tried to be gentle and failed, "I'm asking you to sign tonight. It will be easier for everyone." "For you," Evelyn said. "Not for everyone." A muscle jumped in Sabrina's cheek. "You can't keep doing this," she snapped before smoothing her tone. "We are the next generation. We have plans. We need the house in our name to move forward. It's logical." "Logic," Evelyn said, "doesn't erase promises." Charles cleared his throat. "Let's be practical. We've arranged a new place for Evelyn. Close enough to visit. Clean, safe. This transition can be graceful if we all cooperate." Evelyn felt a heat rise in her chest, not wild but focused. She slid her hand to the folder on the chair, the paper cool under her fingers. "A graceful transition," she repeated, tasting the words. "Then we should start with the truth." She stood. Not fast, not dramatic, just a woman rising from a chair she had owned for years. Every eye followed her. She took the folder and placed it gently on the tablecloth, beside the black plates and empty vases. "Before anyone signs anything," she said, "we need to understand who can sign. And who cannot." Brandon's voice sharpened. "Mom." "Brandon," she said, and the word carried years inside it. Birthdays, school plays, scraped knees, first suits, the hand he once held when his father died. "I will not be cruel to you. But I will not let you be cruel to me." From the den came the rustle of a page turning. The sound steadied her. She opened the folder and laid out the pages with careful hands, each sheet square to the edge of the table. The notary leaned a fraction closer in spite of himself. "Since you want straightforward," Evelyn said, "let us be very clear." Brandon reached for the top page as if to push it aside. Evelyn placed 2 fingertips on the corner and stopped him with almost no pressure at all. Her eyes did what her hands did, held. "Read," she said. And the room, so sure it knew the ending, held its breath. "You said." The room was still. Only the soft crack of the fireplace and the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Brandon's hand hovered over the papers Evelyn had laid out, but it was clear he hadn't yet read the bold title at the top. His friends leaned forward. Sabrina's phone lowered at last, Charles's confident smirk thinning as his eyes moved across Evelyn's calm face. "Mom," Brandon said again, though this time his voice lacked weight. Evelyn nodded to the first page. "Go on. Read aloud. Since you've made this such a public matter, let's keep it honest in front of everyone." He swallowed. His eyes flicked across the black letters. Then he frowned. What is this?" "It's called a living trust," Evelyn said, her voice smooth and steady. "I signed it weeks ago. This house is legally secured. I will live here until the end of my days. And after that," she turned her gaze toward the den, where Chloe's keep-out sign swayed slightly. "After that, it belongs to Chloe." Gasps moved around the table like a breeze through dry leaves. Nora, her book club friend, covered her mouth in surprise. The neighbor cleared his throat, hiding a smile. The notary blinked twice, then leaned in closer to confirm what he already suspected from the document's seal. Sabrina's smile collapsed. "That's ridiculous," she snapped, her polished tone cracking. "You can't just—" "I can," Evelyn said, cutting her off, her eyes sharp now. "And I did. These papers were filed and witnessed long before you staged your little announcement. You tried to humiliate me in front of my own friends. You tried to turn my son against me. But you forgot one thing. I am not a fool." Brandon's face flushed red. He glanced at Sabrina, then at Charles, searching for support. But for once, Charles didn't meet his eyes. The older man leaned forward, scanning the pages as if looking for a loophole, but the stamp and signatures stared back at him like stone walls. "This isn't fair," Brandon muttered. "Fair?" Evelyn's voice trembled with restrained pain. "Fair is raising you alone after your father died. Fair is putting you through college, paying your bills when you struggled, holding you when you failed. Fair is letting you and your wife live under my roof when you said it was only for a year. Don't you dare stand there and lecture me about fair." Her words struck harder than any gavel. Brandon sat back, lips parted but silent. Sabrina reached for the papers with trembling hands, as if she could still tear them. Evelyn calmly lifted them before Sabrina's fingers could touch. "Don't," she said. The single word froze Sabrina in place. Charles finally found his voice, though it was rough. "This is emotional nonsense. The girl is 8 years old. She can't own a house." Evelyn fixed him with a steady stare. "The trust owns the house. Chloe is the heir. You, Mr. Wells, have no authority here. Nor will you ever." Charles's mouth tightened into a thin line. He leaned back, folding his arms, suddenly very quiet. The air in the room had shifted. The earlier arrogance had drained out, leaving only shame and discomfort. Brandon's friends looked away, embarrassed to have been dragged into such a scene. Nora reached out, brushing Evelyn's hand under the table in quiet solidarity. From the den, Chloe peeked out, her small head lifting the blanket flap. "Grandma," she whispered. Evelyn softened at once. "It's all right, sweetheart. Come here." Chloe ran over, her crayon still clutched in one hand, and climbed onto her grandmother's lap. Evelyn kissed her hair and held her close. "This house is yours one day," she whispered softly enough that only Chloe heard. "No one can take it from you." Brandon's eyes filled, a mix of anger and something softer. Guilt, maybe, though buried too deep to show. Sabrina turned away, grabbing her purse in jerky motions. "We're leaving," she hissed. She tugged at Brandon's sleeve, but he didn't move. He just sat there, staring at the papers, his hands useless on the table. Evelyn finally stood, Chloe balanced against her side. She gathered the trust papers and slid them back into the folder. Her voice rose, not loud, but strong enough to reach everyone at the table. "You all came tonight expecting to see me pushed aside. Instead, you saw the truth. This is my home. My husband built it with me, my daughter-in-law will never own it, and my son will only inherit through his child. You tried to use the new year to write me out. But let this be clear. The future of this house is written, and it is not yours to decide." The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Brandon's shoulders slumped. Sabrina stormed out first, her heels clacking sharply on the floor. Charles muttered something under his breath and followed her. Brandon lingered a moment longer, eyes locked on Evelyn, but there were no words left. He left without a goodbye. When the door shut, Evelyn released a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Nora rose from her seat and hugged her tightly. "You were brilliant," she whispered. Others nodded, murmuring approval, some even clapping softly. Evelyn smiled faintly. She didn't feel triumphant, only steady, like a tree still standing after a storm. She kissed Chloe's forehead again and whispered, "We're safe." Outside, another firework lit the winter sky, painting the glass with color. Evelyn turned toward the window and thought, "Let them think they won. I had the firework all along." And for the first time in weeks, her heart finally felt light.